wrong. And aggressive behavior, it's more about you not being in control of your behavior. When you are angry, you being unable to control your feelings or how you react. Maybe you react in a way that is not going to be pleasant to other people. Aggressive behavior can cause physical or emotional harm to others. It may range from verbal abuse to physical abuse. Aggressive behavior violates social boundaries. The first to admit, acknowledge, and seek help. In studio, like I said, we are joined by Dr. Pudisang, who is a professional psychologist. Doctor, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning to you too. Just can you just give us a brief background of your profession as a psychologist?
Sure. Unexpected. Where do I start?
Oh, it must be a huge career.
No, it's just something I'm not used to talking to myself, so I wouldn't even know what to say. But I can just say I'm a senior student counselor who is also a clinical psychologist at UNISA.
Okay.
Of course, there are a number of things that I do within UNISA and outside UNISA, but the main focus is assisting people with their personal challenges and people finding meaning in life. I think that's the brief.
From the words of a professional.
Yeah, yeah, darling, in brief.
Yeah.
So, Doctor, what is your understanding of aggressive behavior?
Look, for me, aggressive behavior, I always take it as a way of defining a relationship or a person negotiating a relationship or a way of communicating the position, the view of life, and also positioning of the person. So when I relate to you in an aggressive behavior, possibly I'm communicating something about myself, where I am, about the relationship, and also about you and the boundaries of the relationship.
Okay.
But also it's important that when we understand aggressive behavior, because there are a number of reasons, we need to classify the aggressive behavior. Because sometimes, remember, a person will respond in an aggressive behavior because of a particular condition. You used words in the introduction when they're not in control of themselves at all. For example, you will find that people who have got mental illness, with certain types of mental illness, they can become aggressive. Maybe because they, again, when we're talking about defining a relationship or communicating where the person is, you will hear a person saying, I am scared, I'm hearing voices that says people are going to kill me. So if already you are hearing voices or you are seeing people who are coming to attack you, it's quite common, logical, that you must defend yourself. And what type of behavior then will you display? It will be aggression.
So is that like schizophrenia, where you hear voices in your head?
Yeah, it could be. A lot of people, when you say hear voices, they always say schizophrenia.
Yeah.
But remember, there are a number of other mental conditions that a person can still hear voices.
Okay.
So schizophrenia is one common one. Bipolar, at some stage, people hear voices.
Really?
But yes, certain types of bipolar, they could respond that they hear voices. Also, people with mental retardation, depending on the severity, they could hear voices and respond with aggressive behavior. When we talk about that, I said a mental illness. Under the category of a mental illness, we also have people where we would say they've got a personality disorder. Remember, they are categorized differently. There are certain types of personality disorders also that comes with aggression. One could talk about borderline personality. At times they've got aggression. One can also talk about people with also paranoid personality. They can become quite aggressive. And also maybe narcissistic people, they can also be aggressive. So that's one kind of why people can be aggressive. Then under substance, which there is always an issue of mental illness and all that, but substance induced aggressive behavior. For example, if a person is intoxicated with particular types of drugs, they've got a tendency to be aggressive. Or they are going through withdrawal symptoms, Some people, maybe they have not been getting the drugs for some time and they are under craving. They can be quite unstable and also can become quite aggressive. So those are the two things we need to understand. Also, when we talk about mental condition, something I forgot that just came now, some people with epilepsy, before or after epileptic seizures, they could become aggressive. And there is a certain type of epilepsy where a person in their stage of fit, they display aggressive behavior, which you might not be able to understand. So aggressive behavior, though it's quite unpleasant, we also need to contextualize it. Well, where is the space where this person is and what is the person trying to communicate? Of course, also one other thing is when a person is depressed, they suddenly become aggressive. So this nice, sweetest person would become, because they are irritable, they've got aggressive outbursts and all that. And when thinking about that also, it's after a head injury, after a traumatic head injury on a particular area of the brain, where you will hear experts saying the likelihood is the person had a frontal brain damage, because once you have got that frontal brain damage, you cannot be able to control, you don't have inhibition, you are quite impulsive, you can't regulate your own behavior, but there are other parts of the brain too that you could display with that type of behavior. So there are a number of components that we need to take into consideration when we see an aggressive behavior.
I hear you, doctor, and I believe that aggressive behavior has a lot to do with actions. But then now my question is, does it have something to do with anger?
Yes, depending where it's coming from. For example, somebody who is having a fit, that person is just part of the manifestation of an illness, not necessarily that a person is angry. Yeah, but to a person who is depressed, depending on the circumstances of their depression, they will have a component of anger. That's why you will find that person all of a sudden having aggressive outburst. So it also have that element of anger, where you feel life is unfair, you resent people, you resent maybe a particular person. That's why it's always important. It's about defining the relationship, putting the boundaries. Also, aggressive behavior could be seen as a way of protecting themselves. And one exciting element which aggressive behavior always manifests, it's a person with low self-confidence. And that's always overlooked, because you will find the person who feels very vulnerable, feelings very inadequate, and as a way of masking the vulnerability and a low self-esteem, they display with anger. I always say,
respond with anger.
But the anger is actually to say, don't come closer to me, because from the outside, when I'm angry, you will not even come closer, and I feel safer because you will not really see my sense of inadequacies and sort of vulnerability. I always said, the big dogs normally that bite from the distance, they always don't bite.
Yes.
But it's the quietest dog that's bite. So that's always a metaphor I have when explaining the aggression and the low self-confidence, because a lot of people wouldn't think it's a manifestation of low self-confidence and a sense of inadequacy, but it's being protected or being masked.
I think that also applies to us as human beings. The people who are usually quiet, we can maybe define them as introverts sometimes. I believe that those are the most dangerous people, because they don't usually talk and express their feelings and everything like that. But the minute they're gonna respond, hey, it's gonna be a bomb.
Yeah. There is also that way also with aggression or anger, where a person does sort of harbors a lot of emotions, and then you've got a lot of anger, or you then also form an opinion, which sometimes is very painful. And then at the end, then you've got this aggressive behavior because of something that you have not been able to express, you have not been able to deal with, and it impacts on you. I mean, a lot of times people always see aggressive behavior as impacting on people on the receiving end.
Yes,
But I must
yes.
tell you, it has got a lot of impact on the person.
Yes.
Whether you are harboring, remember, because there are people who have got what we call passive aggression.
Yes.
So they won't show overtly. Covertly, yeah. They won't they won't display their aggression, but it's there. You can feel it. They've got this passive way of showing their aggression, but they have it. They have it inside themselves. So they are like a ticking bomb, but it impacts on them. It weighs on them. They are very tired, or they are unhappy, and they don't enjoy anything. Even a person who displays, you will hear a person says, "I am not celebrating what I have done. I've got a lot of guilt. I don't know if I can be given a chance to correct what have happened. I will." You know, you get what I'm saying. So they also have this residual impact on how they conduct themselves, because remember, when a person normally display aggressive behavior, they sort of become impulsive. You don't think through your action, and in some instances then you are excessive. You then also do things that
And protective.
and you do things that impact on you. That's when you will wake up and think, if I'm given a chance, I will possibly do things differently.
So some people look very motho ke chobolo, oh my. Motho ke chobolo, this person is very stern and would you define that as aggressive behavior, or just standing your
you know
ground?
what, I'm so happy. I was thinking while I was sitting outside, because a lot of times people are labeled aggressive because they are assertive, and people don't get their way through.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And normally it's not because sometimes people are uncomfortable. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with the truth. People are uncomfortable with you being congruent.
And they're turning it around.
They turn it around because I remember we also live in a society that anything, I'm not sure whether was it last time when we were here, that anything we can't deal with, we label it.
Yes,
we label it pathological.
Yes.
So if you are quite assertive and you are firm and all that, people who are uncomfortable, they will also say you are aggressive.
Yes.
But are you necessarily aggressive?
Or are you just being assertive?
You are just being assertive and you are just being congruent, where you say, this I don't want, this is not how I want life to be done. But not necessarily aggressive. You can deal with the difficulty. You can say, if this is how things could be done, I'm sorry, I'm not part of this. But that it doesn't mean you are aggressive. You are just being very clear and with yourself and your needs and your principle.
Thank you.
And whether other people then perceive that as aggressive, because sometimes people always just say, if it doesn't go my way, then this person is aggressive, I won't deal with that person. People also have got a tendency, they want to talk to somebody who will agree, or who will even agree,
no,
who don't stand out, because sometimes people will say, I hear what you are saying, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do it. It's okay. Because that's a problem where people also are labeled unnecessarily.
Yeah. Okay.
So now, Doctor, looking at this case that we were dealing with that happened last week, the girl that was stabbed like 52 times, do you think the person who was doing that, was he angry, or was he dealing with some things that we might not know of?
I wouldn't want to speculate on something where we don't even have, all the facts. But you must also remember, if you hear a lot about crime scene situation in general, even when you are being hijacked, or you are being robbed, or you are being raped and all that, the person gets frustrated. And that's why aggression is one of that thing with the crime. So if a person, then you are fighting back and all that, and then there is the issue of control, and always aggression comes out, where you will hear a person get shot, or you will hear even in house robbery how people get aggravated, sort of quite impatient, and their aggression escalates. Maybe they want something and maybe they can't find it, and all that, because they are also under fear that we need to do this quickly and go. and then a lot of things could happen. But we can't talk about this case. We can't speculate because we don't have the information. We don't know, and it's still very fresh. It will also be insensitive to comment on that particular case.
Okay.
Well, I hear you. I hear you.
So what would you say to someone who just listened to the show and they've gained some awareness about aggression, and you realize that sort of behavior in yourself? Basically, how do you deal with your own, as an individual, your own aggressive behavior?
Look, it can be dealt with. I always encourage people that, as I said, I want to say sometimes you have resorted to aggression, which is quite ineffective way of defining relationship and defining yourself. So the question is, you need help. You need help because at the end, I always say to people, what is always interesting for me, all of us sitting here, we have got a cousin, we have got that person in the family who will always complain that nobody loves me. But
or
when
maybe it's me who's complaining.
yeah, but when you think about that person, you think, sure, she's always not happy. A simple compliment could end up into something big. So you will be reluctant to even phone that person or talk to that person because of the aggressive behavior. But at the same time, you realize that that person have got a need to be loved, to be accepted. So aggressive behavior is very ineffective because it impacts on the real need you have. It's also an ineffective way of communicating your needs or defining relationship. You actually get the opposite of what you want if you use aggressive behavior. So the question is, what type of needs do you have? How can you articulate those needs in a more effective way? Because that is not effective. And once you harbor this aggressive behavior, it also impacts on you. It weighs you down. A lot of people with aggressive behavior, they don't really appreciate who they are because aggressive behavior actually fills the inner person in you that you don't believe in yourself. You can pretend, but when you are alone, it hits you to say, you can't live all the time to say, but why did I do that? Was it necessary? Or you keep on apologizing. You will hear a lot of those people in relationship, you keep on apologizing, but you do the same thing, and people at some stage, they give up on you. So it can always be worked through, and it doesn't mean you will need medication, depending on what is underlying. Maybe if there is a mental illness, maybe they might recommend medication, but you can deal with therapy. Even if things have happened in life, because there are people today who are very aggressive or who are very angry because of real things that has happened in life. But you're not going to allow those experiences to hold you hostage for the rest of your life. There could be something you can take from that experience and you can be a happy person. Not to let that experience to keep you captive, that you are angry, because even if it was done by another person, it means you are allowing that person to be in control of your life, your whole life. It means you are allowing that experience to define who you are. Because if this anger is linked to that experience, then your life is always a shadow of that experience.
I hear you very well, and you sharing a very informative information right there, Doctor. But then, in simple terms, according to my understanding, you are saying that aggressive behavior, it's not a way to get the things that you want, or it's not a solution to anything at all.
I always say it's not effective, because I always look at, there are things that are effective, there are things that are ineffective. Even if you are in a relationship, one day you force this person to get what you want. It won't happen the third, the fourth time, because that relationship will not be sustained. You get what I'm saying? So for once it will work for you, but second, third time, relationships then are not sustainable.
So where do we get more information about aggressive behavior? Or maybe I feel like maybe I'm at that point right now, I need to just educate myself to better my life.
I think also it's important that you get a soundboard.
Oh,
You go and talk to somebody. You can go to the counselor. You can go to our website, so that we can also have insight. Because sometimes people, when they do things on themselves, we also tend to pathologize ourselves. Go and get the context of how this thing have developed and how do you work through it, because already that's a really informative step, or it's a great step towards your healing. Just the insight to say there is something not well, there is something that I'm not comfortable with, and I think I need to take that step, just to liberate yourself, because the anger sort of kept you captive, and just dealing with that and releasing that, you liberate yourself.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us in studio today.
Thank you.
And that was Dr. Kodisam.